Hi, everyone. My name is Frana Kviachorka. I'm from Digital Communication Network. And today we are going to discuss building partnerships, how we can be better in the digital space, and not only how we can collaborate with journalists, with governments, with non-for-profits, with for-profits. And this series is organized by Digital Communication Network Southeast Europe Hub, in collaboration with the US Agency for Global Media and World Learning. And it's the part of the DCNC Ideas in Action Digital Engagement Series. So we also thankful to our partners. US Department of State Office of Citizen Exchanges supports Digital Communication Network Southeast Europe Hub. So for now we have 23 participants and three distinguished speakers. And my colleague, who is the co-host today, Nikos Panagiotou from Aristotle University. Hi, Nikos.
Hi, thank you, Franak. And I would like to thank everyone for being here with us and actually the invited speakers.
And we have today three great speakers working in different areas, in quite different sectors, in different regions. We have Inna Dubinsky from the US Agency for Global Media. She's a development and training project manager, but she's doing so much things, not only for US AGM, but for the global media as well. And I think she has friends at every continent in the world. Hi, Inna.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.
We also have Katarina Klingova, who is a senior fellow of the Strategic Communication Program at GLOBSEC in Slovakia. Hi, Katka.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. Thank you for having me here.
And finally, we have Michael Mirny from IREX, who is the director of the Information and Media Practice there. And I'm very excited to hear from Michael about all bunch of programs they're managing at IREX. But Michael also has journalistic background, which is quite a common thing, I think, for the audience today. And I think, Michael, you also worked for Radio Free Europe, correct?
Correct. I used to work for Radio Free Europe. Hello, everyone. And then for the BBC World Service. Wow. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here.
Fantastic, fantastic. So this event is recorded. We are streaming to Facebook and YouTube. Feel free to share this video afterwards. It will be available forever, I hope, till YouTube exists. And to begin today's conversation, I will invite Inna Dubinsky to make the introductory presentation about USAGM and all fantastic work you do. Inna?
Thank you, Franak. Thank you, Nikos, for having me, and welcome to everybody who participate in this event. You probably are in one of these countries that are now on the map of USAGM mission. And our mission is to inform, engage, and connect people around the world in support of freedom and democracy. Our history counts back 75 years when the Voice of America was created in 1942 during the Second World War. And our organizational structure is represented here. We have both federal networks and grantee networks. It's the Voice of America. You probably are familiar with that organization if you are in Africa, where we all over the world, or in countries in Europe or East Asia Pacific. Office of Cuba Broadcasting, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Middle Eastern Broadcasting Network, Radio Free Asia, and our new Open Technology Fund. So we do broadcast all around the world in 61 languages. We produce more than 3,000 hours of original programming each week, all of our networks, with focus on different regions. We work independently. USAGM has firewall. It is journalistic credibility that is guaranteed by this firewall that is enshrined in the United States International Broadcasting Act of 1994. It ensures that all journalists work up to the highest professional standards of journalism, and they are free of political interference. As I said, we broadcast in 61 languages. You probably find in this slide one of the languages that is yours, all these vernacular languages all around the world. And we reach the audience of 350 million people now. How do we do that? How do we do that? We are committed to developing partnerships with individual organizations and other entities to achieve a common goal to support the agency's mission. These partnerships with organizations that you have on this slide are voluntary. They're mutually beneficial collaborative relationships. And partners can provide resources that assist USAGM in accomplishing its objectives. And likewise, USAGM, within the confines of applicable law, may provide resources to a partnership. These partnerships involve a mutual exchange of ideas, information, services, and some partnerships may involve funding, although most of them are in-kind contributions, no cost, and they are solely based on shared interests. So what is the partnership process? What does it involve? The partnerships are governed by well-defined written agreements, which are called Memorandum of Understanding, but they do not include grants or contracts. USAGM Partnership Committee reviews and approves partnerships before they are approved by the agency's chief executives, and all partnerships are reviewed annually. What is included in the Memorandum of Understanding?
I think you have slides. Can you share with us?
I do share a slide, actually.
Not yet, not yet. Can you try them? Yes.
Interesting.
I know you have beautiful slides and we don't see them.
Franek, you do have access to my slides. Can you show the slide of the partnership organizations? May I ask you to help me with that? Because on my screen, I do have slides.
Sure, I'll try.
So the slide that I want to ask you to show is who, where, when, why, and how. And the subsequent slide, thank you so much for helping me with that. Next slide, Franek, please. Next. And the next, I was talking about that global audience. And the next slide, next, this one. So these are these are, I'm sorry, on my end it doesn't work. So Franek, thank you for your help. So that's what's included in our MOUs, Memorandum of Understanding for No-Cost Partnerships. Its intent, purpose, scope of the project, decision-making, distribution, publicity and promotion, branding, ownership, and intellectual property rights, and financial concerns, no cost of in-kind contribution, duration, and the option of extension or termination. So may I ask you to show the next slide, please, Franek? So the USAGM no-cost partnerships with the US government agencies. Let me show you just a few examples. Michael Mirny is here. He will talk a little bit about that more, but we do work with them closely since 2018. Just recently, on the 28th of May, we co-hosted an excellent 1-hour discussion on digital surveillance and censorship in Eurasia in the age of COVID-19. Both our speakers and IREX speakers participated in that. We work with Freedom House, with non-governmental organizations in many countries in Eurasia. With DCN, of course, we participated in their events. We talked to their participants. We work with the US government organization Open World Leadership Center at the Library of Congress. as we speak, we co-hosting with them many events for participants of their programs. May I ask you, Franek, to change slides and go to content distribution. One of the ways how we partner with our collaborators, it's content distribution. At the US Department of State, they have American Spaces Office, which are in charge of 700 American spaces in the countries around the world. So Voice of America Let's Learn English program is part of American Spaces offices. Anybody coming to American Spaces in any country of the world can open the computer and learn English using the Voice of America Let's Learn English. The Voice of America Polygraph Info fact-checking content in many languages is shown on partners' multiple platforms. We do co-production of investigative reports with our partners. And USA GM Direct is a hub that is specially designed to reach the broadcast affiliates, our partners and digital partners of the United States Agency for Global Media. That's how we reach more than 350 million people around the world through our partners by co-producing content, by distributing content on their platform, but by rebroadcasting and co-producing content. Now, can you please, Franek, show the content co-production and acquisition? Just a few examples. Voice of America Albanian service and Bosnian service with the Balkans Investigative Reporters Network, BERN, and Center for Investigative Reporting in Sarajevo have been investigating corruptions of elected officials in the Balkans. Just to give you an example of impact. Thanks to this investigation, in the city of Duran in Albania, the second largest city in the country, an elected official was actually, brought to court, brought to justice because of corruption. Thanks to this investigation and thanks to publication and broadcasting of this investigative story on multiple platforms, including Voice of America Albanian Service television show. Radio Free Europe Radio Liberty works with the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. And they, together with OCCRP member, Central Klub in Kyrgyzstan, received the prestigious 2019 Tom Renner Award for investigative reporters and editors for plunder and patronage in the heart of Central Asia. It's a 6-part report revealing the operations of massive underground network that funneled more than $700 million from Kyrgyzstan. So there are dozens of other examples. We work with VOA Learning English, with Stony Brook University, which is the hub that has been for 10 years accumulating lots of content on media literacy. So VOA Learning English, based on access to our partner Stony Brook University archives, produced an 8-episode media literacy series for those who learn English. And it is now used in 600 American spaces globally. So Current Time TV works with many partners and acquires their award-winning documentaries that are viewed in 18 countries. You probably have seen the latest Internet wonderful documentary. If you haven't, just make sure to watch it. It's available on YouTube. Now, as I mentioned, we do co-production. We work with our partners, in Georgia. And this partnership has been made has happened thanks to our partnership with IREX. So IREX and us, we do, work on stories debunking major fake news in Georgia and neighboring countries. Just recently, VOA Polygraph and IREX partners in Georgia published a big investigative story on the drug remdesivir. It fact-checked the remdesivir, and it fact-checked also other stories about the labs working in Georgia. So that's great collaboration. So what is the purpose of these collaborations? To strengthen democracy, civil society, nationally and regionally, by doing the following, as I mentioned, as you've seen in my slides previously: providing media training to professional and citizen journalists, co-hosting journalism conferences, conducting media literacy programs for citizens, co-producing investigative reports, by fact-checking and verifying information, broadcasting and distributing co-produced content, collaborating on media markets and audience research, establishing an extensive and powerful network connecting international organizations, national leadership, journalists, and active citizenry as a foundation of open democracy society. And we are trusted because we are locally with our partners. So these are just a few examples. Thanks to this partnership, we had a very successful first ever training by the agency in Uzbekistan last year in Tashkent. Our priorities in these partnerships are to maximize program delivery agility, to enhance strategic coordination between networks, to focus on key issues and audiences, to improve accountability and impact measurement, target public-private partnerships on innovation and media research. And one special attention I would like to draw you to: supporting internet freedom worldwide. This is done through our new Open Technology Fund that works to advance internet freedom. And to do that, we work with partners, with innovative IT firms all around the world. And thanks to that partnership, we counter attempts by authoritarian governments to control the internet and restrict freedom online. And today, over 2 billion people use the Open Technology Fund supported technology daily. More than 2/3 of all mobile users globally, maybe including you, have technology incubated by OTF on their devices. OTF also created the first Internet Freedom Guide for USAGM Network and other international broadcasters. You can check it out, bypasscensorship.org. Our global partnership is also a major one with DG7 members. What is DG7? Director General 7. It comprises publicly funded international public service media organizations from 7 democratic nations: ABC Australia, CBC Radio Canada, France Medias Monde, Deutsche Welle, NHK World Japan, BBC World Services, and of course, US Agency for Global Media. So since 2013, we've had this partnership, and we focus in these partnerships on technological cooperation. For instance, shortwave transmission in Africa, we share shortwaves. Anti-jamming efforts in Iran, for instance, or in China. Internet freedom and governance. Countering disinformation, it's Project Origin, initiated by Canada, CBS. Truly Media, Polygraph Info at Voice of America. We share research and journalism training, of course. So that's basically it. That's what I wanted to share with you. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Inna. I think this video can be recorded and promoted and be the promotional video for USAGM.
Thank you.
And I think it's only like 1% of what USAGM is doing, because really the scope of work is huge, and it's impossible to mention everything. But the most
important... I'll be happy, Franek, to answer any questions if there are further questions about our partnership and collaboration project. Okay.
Of course, they will be there already, but let's take them a bit later. So can I ask now Michael, perhaps, if Michael is ready, from IREX, to continue this conversation about the global efforts, what can be done? Because after I will be asking uncomfortable question, what is not done yet and what can be done better?
Sounds
Michael?
good. I'm very ready. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Let me start by sharing, excuse me, by sharing my screen. And I have prepared a couple of slides for today's presentation. And basically, I'll show you a couple of slides about IREX, for those of you who do not know what IREX is. And then I have one important slide about, the challenges that we're facing right now in the world of media, civil society, and that will be a good way to start talking about the partnerships. But before I do this, I actually wanted to thank Ina for mentioning IREX and US AGM partnership. This partnership is extremely important for us. Thanks to this partnership with US AGM, we managed to organize a number of activities, as Ina mentioned, in Central Asia, in Albania, in Tirana, and in many other places. But it's not just about events. It's also about, building sustainable partnerships between big organizations like US government, US AGM organization, and us, a nonprofit organization that is based in DC. So first two slides, I'll go real fast. This is just basically about IREX. For those of you who do not know IREX, we've been around for about 50 years. You can see my slides, right? Just wanted to confirm. You can, right? Okay, good. So we've been around for about 50 years, and just recently we analyzed how many people we reach per year, and right now I can say that, like last year, for instance, we reached more than 3 million people through our community centers. We worked with more than 3,000 institutions, and we touched the lives of about 26,000 leaders. This may seem random because IREX does lots and lots of things. We have 5 practices: education, youth, and civil society support. I'm the director of media practice. It's called information and media. So basically, this is what you're seeing right now on the screen is the global statistics for all of IREX. But if we're talking about media, we organize programs, various kinds of programs, but mostly we're focusing our work on media literacy, on journalism trainings, on citizen journalist support. We do media studies, and one of our media studies, some of you may be familiar with, is called MSI, Media Sustainability Index. And starting next year, we are rolling out the new media study, also supported by USAID, called VIBE, Vibrant Information Barometer. And also we have 2 programs focused on journalism safety. I say digital safety here because this is a common theme between those 2 programs, but actually one of the programs goes beyond digital safety. We also train journalists on physical safety and psychological safety, psychosocial safety. If you have any questions about that program or any other program, I'll be more than happy to answer those questions during our Q&A session. But I think right now we wanted to talk a little bit about the partnerships. So last thing about IREX, the practice that I work at has 24 programs. Most of them are funded by USAID, Department of Human Rights and Labor, or the Foreign and Commonwealth Office of the United Kingdom. We have about 130 staff all over the world. I love maps. And, I also teach a course at Merrill School of Journalism at University of Maryland. And my students would attest that I have quite a few maps of different things, maps of media freedom, maps of specific regions, maps of, how bloggers work differently in different kinds of parts of the world. This is basically a map of where we are represented at IREX. So we work, as you can see, pretty much everywhere, with the exception of several countries like France or Canada. We do not work there. This is the slide. You don't have to read this, but this is just wanted to show you something fun. One of the programs that we run is called Learn to Discern. It is a program that we run in Ukraine. And a couple of months ago, actually almost a year ago, as you know, they had presidential elections. And before the presidential elections, we had a big program focusing on media literacy specifically. We wanted the voters in Ukraine to understand, like, how do you assess candidates or what those candidates are saying, how to fact check things and things like that. So we had 2 presidential candidates, Murchik and Barsik. And basically we have, this is like one slide of a 400 slide presentation virtual course that we have organized online in Ukraine right before the elections, and this is part of the training that we have organized there. And this is the last slide of my presentation, but that's the most important one. I just wanted to draw your attention to the things that we have identified as the major challenges of media and civil society world. First and foremost, I wanted to say that, you know, we often say that everyone is a content creator these days. It used to be, you know, traditional media, radio, newspapers, then TV, then online media. Now the situation has changed. Every single one of you has either a Facebook account or Twitter account or other social networks accounts, and all of you most likely produce content constantly. And many of content creators we work with, citizen journalists, many of them have more followers than newspapers. There are some people in Moldova, for instance, who have more and better following than local newspapers in Moldova or in Ukraine or in Russia or in Albania. This is not new, but this is something that we are only now starting to really comprehend. It's very hard to understand how this media environment will actually survive, what's going to be the new trends here, and how it works. So basically, rapid technological changes related to information flows, I touched upon it a little bit, and of course, new opportunities for sharing information across borders. You know, it may sound really strange right now, but if we go back only, you know, 50 years ago, that would be, you know, a British newspaper, and only people inside the United Kingdom would read this newspaper, and then would be an American newspaper or a Soviet newspaper, and only people in the Soviet Union would really read this newspaper. Right now, the situation obviously has changed. Everything is global. One of the bigger things that we have identified, it's related to new threats to individual privacy and security, and that's why I keep mentioning this one out of 24 programs, but one program that I think is quite important is the program where we train journalists and citizen journalists on the basics of digital security, on the basics of physical security and psychosocial security, which is not no less important than the other types of security. And of course, this creates new challenges. The fact that privacy of journalists is quite often compromised changes how journalists work, how they report, how information flows are going in the world. Increased need for media and digital literacy across all segments of society. And this is also a big issue that we have identified. And this is the issue that I would like to talk more about today, since we're talking about the partnerships between journalists, civil society, and other actors in the world. One thing that we noticed recently is that, you know, media can be professional, not professional. Some media are transmitting propaganda. Some media are highly professional. But at the same time, majority of people in the world, and we have the statistics, I don't have it handy, but we have the statistics for several countries, they just trust media or don't trust media, but there is no direct correlation with what we think is an independent media and the level of trust. What I mean by that is that the level of trust, obviously, is going down. We all know that. We all know that if you ask people in any country in the world, be it Kiev or New York, and ask them, do you guys trust media? And most people will say, well, no. So vast majority of people in the world, they do not really trust media these days. But the problem is that they distrust New York Times as much as they distrust a marginalized, you know, propaganda, disinformation website. They won't trust this one or that one. But you know what? Those 30 or 40% of people who actually do trust media, their level of trust, they will trust the New York Times as much as they will trust the media outlet that transmits and amplifies propaganda. So I'm oversimplifying it right now. And I'm oversimplifying it because basically I don't want to spend too much time talking about the specifics in every single country we are working at. But I do want to point out that media and digital literacy is critical these days. We need to help citizens, not just journalists, NGO, members of the civil society, staff members of NGOs, government officials all over the world. We need to help them understand who do you trust? Who can you trust? How it works. With IREX, we're a non-political organization. We're a non-profit organization, so we don't tell them who they should be trusting and who they should be not trusting. No, we never do that. What we do instead, we organize media literacy trainings for people. And basically, we teach people the basics of fact-checking, or even the basics of reading the news. You see something that's scary or too exciting or hard to believe, just don't share this. Go Google it. Try to see other sources, see whether where this photo came from or where this video is authentic. And you know what? Fact checking is not as hard. And we believe that a babushka in Ukraine or a professional in New York can both do fact checking pretty fast. So that's a big issue that we have identified recently. The last two I wanted to touch upon are the new forms of censorship and the new methods of circumventing censorship. And there are many new forms of censorship. This is not just, an old censor we used to think of those Soviet or Chinese media outlets where you have a censor who says, okay, you can do this or you cannot do that. And now, unfortunately, we're seeing a much more sophisticated mixed censorship where you will see censorship that is that you will see in the media outlet where you work, or the social network that is basically transmitting it, or anywhere in between. So there are many forms of censorship these days, but there are also many methods of circumventing this censorship. And we're also teaching journalists and non-journalists how to use VPNs and other ways how they can access information in closed and closing societies. And the last one I wanted to touch upon is the new methods for individual civil society and private sector and corporations and governments to utilize information for both productive and destructive means. And this is something that we will be researching through the new Vibrant Information Barometer study. We will be working with in a number of countries in Eastern Europe mostly, and we will be studying how information and data is being utilized by the government, other actors in productive and not so productive ways, and what could be done with that. So I was given about 7 minutes for my presentation. I hope I didn't go, I didn't take too much time, but that is pretty much it with my presentation. I will stop sharing. And as I said, I will be more than happy to answer questions when we go to the answering questions section of this event. Thank you very much for your attention.
Michael, thanks so much for this awesome presentation. So I like this flow. We are going from the global things, to more concrete detailed actions, and now we are going to the very specific space. And I'd like to invite here Katarina Katka from Slovakia. She'll be talking about GLOBSEC and their fantastic initiative, which I'm always mentioning at all possible events as the greatest example of collaboration of NGO and influencers. Katka, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to this debate today. My name is Katarina Klingova. I'm a senior research fellow at GLOBSEC. It's a think tank in Bratislava, Slovakia, and we started to focus on the problematics of disinformation and, vulnerability of society towards information operation back in 2015, because after the annexation of Crimea, we saw that there was a huge inflow of malign information and hoaxes and conspiracy theories coming up and being spread in Central European region. And we very much soon realized that in order to have our research to be more, spread around, to have wider impact on societies, we need credible voices. I'm a researcher and I don't have so many followers. Mikhail, you mentioned that you've been cooperating with journalists that have way more followers than researchers in various countries. So as a researcher, we realized that, we need the credible voices. We need people that have the authority to speak to particular target audience of our research. That's why, we found out that we need to collaborate with different actors, and we need to target our campaigns and our communication in such a way that it's simplistic and it's understandable to our target audience. That's why we started to cooperate with various actors. But let me just share my slide with you. Can you see this? Can you see my presentation? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Let me just do this. So how did we start to cooperate with the influencers? The first person that we more or less started to cooperate was a Slovak comedian and a blogger. His name is Jan Kordulic. He has this weekly show, A Difficult Week with Jan Kordulic, and I would compare him to like a Slovak John Oliver. He's makes fun. He's focused on political satire, and we strived a cooperation with him that every week we gave him information of what was the most spread disinformation within a week. And he established a section in his show called The Hoax of the Weeks, where he debunked and make fun of the disinformation, because laughing at hoaxes and conspiracy theories is a good way how to counter them. Another way how we try to spread our message and talk to young audience was via YouTubers or video bloggers. So back in 2017, we approached these young video bloggers, in particular Exploited and Selassie, and we created an online campaign. This online campaign was lasted 5 days, little over 5 days. It started as a online beef, basically between these two YouTubers that was based on disinformation. And we, of course, thought that, since they have fans, thousands of fans that follow them 24/7, they're going to, come up really quickly on the fact that this campaign, this beef is based on disinformation, but that didn't really happen. So the campaign started as Insta stories and developed into the YouTube videos. It lasted a little less than a week. And basically within 2 days, these guys started to get death threats. They started to get death threats. Their fan base split into 2 groups. I always usually compare them to Star Trek and Star Wars fans who hate each other. At the end of the campaign, both of the YouTubers published 2 revelation videos together, where they explain basically to the young people and everybody who was following their fake beef that, hey guys, you've been punked. This campaign within that week managed to reach over 500,000 of young people. It snowballed to Czech Republic because these video bloggers had a lot of audience and followers in the Czech Republic. The videos became a top trending topic on Slovak YouTube, and overall had over 1.3 million views within that week. The overall impression and reach on other social media combined was something over 4 million. So it was a very simplistic campaign that was based on video bloggers, guys who usually comment and play games, but they themselves realized that we need to start talking about the disinformation. We need to raise awareness about this problem, and young people, their fans, need to fact check information they can consume on the internet. This was 2017. Another campaign that we did, but it had a different twist, was that in 2018, we started a collaboration with Slovak rapper. His name is Matis. He created a track. The track was called David. David was a person who believed in disinformation, who didn't fact check his information. He was living in an information bubble. Basically, David was a troll. And this rapper, Matis, he called upon his fans to send him short videos, depicting any kind of disinformation or conspiracy theories that they know. And the official video to that track was compiled of all these fan-based, fan-created videos. The campaign was had its own hashtag. It was called Music Against Hoaxes, Hudba proti hoaxom in Slovak. The campaign and the topic about needing to fact check your information that you consume, building critical thinking was eventually taken over and supported by other influencers. Again, we were able to reach within very short term over 500,000 of people in Slovakia, but also in Czech Republic. And, it might seems to be a small number, but I live in a country that has 5 million. So getting this big of reach within a week, that's a huge deal. And what do we learn? We learned by doing these campaigns that we need to think out of the box, that we need to really start cooperating with different people, and we need to work with professionals who have these contacts. And we need to not be afraid to take risks. Let me just unshare this with you. And I don't know how to stop this. We can elaborate this campaign later on in the questions, but building whole of society and whole of government resilience, it needs various actors' contribution. And, Mikhail spoke about media literacy trainings. Well, GLOBSEC we created an online course on media and disinformation with 2 universities. Last year, we created an online course for Slovak public servants on hybrid threats. This year in January, we published a publication on audio manual for communicators encountering disinformation, because we found out that a lot of people, do not have necessary with the resources that they need, and they need to build their critical thinking. And it's basically anybody. It's people going to schools, it's NGOs, but also civil society actors and public representatives that need to be educated on this topic.
Wow, that's fantastic. So I like so much, this presentations, because it looks like competition. Who is doing more and better? So if we'll have this chance, we can do voting here, and decide who is better in building partnerships. Just echoing what Katka was mentioning about the influencers, I wanted to give you some examples from USCGM actually. Experience, Radio Free Europe of Russian service, they did involve influencers in creating content. So Russian service invited young people from regions of Russia saying, guys, do you want to become famous? And these guys started recording the video blogs. Some of these video blogs got millions of views, and it's a 4th year in a row. This chapter on the website is one of the most popular. And these influencers from Russian regions helped Radio Free Europe to build up the audience. So Bob Pearson, our colleague, I just stole this slide from him, so it's not mine, but he actually described how influencers and in general popular figures online can help amplifying our message, our topic, make it more efficient and to reach right people, especially niche groups. So according to this theory, when you launch the campaign, you need someone who will prolong the life of the campaign, who will amplify and will create this echo waves. And the stuff which is done by GLOBSEC, a campaign organized by Katka and her team, and of course Ina's projects and then IREX projects, all of them involving local influencers, local organizations. This is part of the strategy. So about influencers, when we speak about influencers, it's not only about bloggers or celebrities, as you realized. It's about every figure, every popular figure or initiative online. So what we want them to be involved. When they're involved, then they're motivated and interested. At Digital Communication Network 2 years ago, we made a mapping of digital influencers, and we identified good influencers who can be involved in campaigns and bad influencers who are promoting and distributing propaganda and disinformation, who must be contained. And each organization, each of yours, I address here our audiences, you have your own influencers, internal influencers, people who are already present on social media, and the most important to involve them, to engage them, and to be them your ambassadors online. So that's my contribution to the last topic on influencers. And now I'd like to ask Nikos Panagiotou to ask the first question. Nikos is professor, and his questions are always the toughest.
No, in general, professors are the ones that they accept questions. So it's very tricky when you have to ask questions. Just want to mention that together with us is Joan Mauer as well from USAGM. Thank you, Joan, for being here. If you want to address, actually say a few words also just before we pass the floor, Frank and Joan. Joan can hear us. Okay. So the first question is regarding the media literacy issue, because from all the speakers had been a major, let's say, element that have been underlined. Do you think that media literacy can help in promoting an awareness regarding the protection of our digital rights? Because we mainly emphasize in tackling disinformation, but as we have seen, there is a lot of discussion and effort being done regarding on whether or not and how we can actually promote the protection of our digital rights. That's my first question that is addressed to everyone, because everyone mentioned the media literacy aspect. Secondly, the question is regarding all these seminars, trainings, etc. What do you think it has been left behind? What other things needs to be done? And thirdly, when there is an issue from the media organization itself, I am a journalist working on a media organization that does not allow me actually to write free to be critical, etc. How can these trainings tackle this issue when a journalist is coming across to institutional restraints? Thank you.
Who wants to take this question? There's 3 toughest questions ever. Ina? Oh, 1 second. Ina, go ahead.
All right. So with media literacy, that's a very important question, Nikos, and it's been around for a long time. So although the media literacy campaign, I'd say would started around a dozen years ago, we need to look at the same as literacy, let's say, on nutrition, right? If you don't teach a child to eat healthy food and the child is grown, the child will continue to eat donuts no matter how bad they are for your health, right? So the media literacy needs to start with early age. Of course, we are catching up now with adults. However, as it is a well-known fact, and Franek reflected it on many times in his very thorough analysis for our agency, People live in their bubbles. They read and trust what they choose to read and trust. And if they are not used to learn to discern, as IREX does in their campaign, teaching children in Ukrainian schools and in Georgian schools now, kids don't get used to it. So we are basically catching up now on media literacy. But again, this should start from the early age. Thank you.
I'm happy to add. Sorry, go ahead.
Michael, I'm sorry for the interruption, but just a quick comment on what Ina has said. Just to underline to everyone that Ina shared with everyone, Sherry Hobb Calver from Temple University, which is a very good friend, and she's doing an excellent work with media literacy. So everyone that might be interested on the topic, please have it in mind. Ina shared actually a lot of stuff that is very representative. Michael, sorry for the interruption.
And of course, no problem. So basically, you asked 3 questions, and I don't know if you would like me to address all 3 or only the first for now. But actually, the first 2 are my answer for the first 2 will be the same. So the first question I just want to remind everyone was about the digital rights and media literacy, what media literacy can do in support of media rights, of digital rights. So basically, as Ina pointed out, and thank you, Ina, for bringing up Learn to Discern, IREX has trainings, media literacy trainings for different constituencies. And I would say that, as Ina correctly pointed out, in Ukraine and in Georgia, right now we work in schools, middle schools, sometimes in high schools, and it is extremely important to, start teaching children the basics of media literacy from a very early age. In France or in Finland, the 2 countries who are leading the way in Europe when it comes to media literacy, children start learning the basics of media literacy in elementary school, in France in middle school. So basically, this is very important. One thing, though, is that when it comes to digital rights and things like that, I would identify one particular constituency that needs to be that we need to start working with. And this is also a second answer to the second question, is who are the ones who we're leaving behind? And this is exactly that same constituency. Those are legislators. I believe that we as media literacy professionals and media literacy trainers and organizations that run those trainings absolutely have to start working with legislators, members of parliament in Ukraine, Armenia, Albania, Montenegro, and all of the other countries in Europe and Eurasia region, to basically help them understand the basics of media literacy. We will not call those trainings media literacy, because media literacy is something that right now is used to, describe trainings for either children or adults who are not members of the government. But if we're talking about legislators, they absolutely need to understand the basics of freedom of speech, the basics of internet freedom. If you ask people in quite a few countries in Europe and Eurasia region, like Russia, Moldova, Ukraine, and ask just random people on the streets, is censorship good? You know what? Majority will say yes. Censorship is actually really good. I don't want my kids to see all of those bad things on the internet, those scammers, those indecent sites, and everything else. So people don't understand basically the concept of censorship, and quite often the spillover effect is that members of parliament, who actually may even mean good things, they will censor freedom of speech just because they want to limit access to scammers and fraudulent websites. So my answer to the first question, what's left behind and what is the constituency that we need to work with, this should be legislators, in my view, in addition to school kids and all of the other people we work and others work with. And then you asked $1 million question, Nicholas. It's what if you're a journalist and your institution does not let you actually speak freely? We call it self-censorship or censorship. And there is no simple answer to that. There is no answer, oh, well, you need to do X, Y, and Z. No, actually, no, unfortunately. We train journalists on how they can actually start their own blogs, start Twittering in those countries and those, communities where it is safe. But there is no simple answer here. Unfortunately, no. We only have a couple of minutes left, so I'll stop right here.
May I just add here, USAGM, it's part of our mission. We do support independent journalism, especially in the countries with repressive regimes. We do provide platforms for their investigative story, for their reporting. Unfortunately, these brave journalists very often suffer consequences. Like over the last weekend, the world learned of yet another independent voice arrested in Vietnam. Journalist, Vietnamese blogger Nguyen Thong Tu, who contributed commentary for 6 years to Radio Free Asia, Vietnamese service, was detained and charged with taking action against the state. 3 journalists in Belarus died while on assignment for the current time television program in Belarus. So, but we do work with and support independent journalism, and they cannot openly, be heard in their countries.
Thank you. And Katka, do you want to take here as well?
Maybe I would address a little bit of question number 2 and question number 3. I think that media literacy is very much important. I mean, all of the speakers have mentioned it before, but there is a huge difference in the countries about the level of media literacy. And I'm coming from a country where we need to really build our media literacy. And when we did, for example, focus groups with young people in Central Europe and also in Western Balkan countries, we realized that there are huge, huge differences in their critical thinking and media literacy capacities. If you want to have engaged and informed civil society and have engaged and informed public debate that is going to cover these topics as digital rights, you need to have an informed society. And I completely agree with Mikhail that you need to engage and collaborate with legislators. But from our experience, we see that these legislators and civil servants, they don't really understand the topic. That's why, first of all, you need to explain the topic of media literacy, information operation, hybrid threats, because they themselves have very limited knowledge about it. And only then, they can pursue and lead the debate and pursue the policy changes that are necessary. And one thing that, I've been working at GLOBSEC for 4 years. Our program has been running 5 years. So one beautiful thing that we observe is that when we started to focus on this topic, there were just very few agents or organizations that were working on this. Now, almost every single standard media has a specialized section on hoaxes and disinformation. There's even a Facebook page, hoaxes and disinformation, Slovak police, they themselves are countering disinformation and debunking stuff. So it's a long-term process. Developing an informed society that is able to fact check and think critically takes years. And one thing that really we need to work on and that make a huge impact, is when you have informed public figures, public representatives who don't spread themselves disinformation, because they have a huge impact on people. And we can observe that in our public opinion polls. We had a declaration of the highest Slovak public representatives reconfirming Slovak Euro-Atlantic orientation. And within basically few months, the increase in the support of EU and NATO went up by 7%. So you need informed public representatives who are not going to be giving credibility to disinformation outlets by giving them interviews, who are going to be supporting investigative journalists, and who are going to be informed enough to be able to pursue good public debate that can have eventually influence on wider public.
Thank you, Katerina. We have some questions here in the comments from Diana Filimon. A lot of teachers are actually the main source of disinformation for kids, 14 years old in Romania. So how can we trust them to teach media literacy? I will take other questions because all of them are around it. But I must say, that here in Belarus, it's the country where disinformation, it's like the capital of disinformation. So we had this information problem before all the world got in trouble with it. So we are quite professional in doing it and countering it, mostly unsuccessfully. So in Belarus, for example, being educated with very good education doesn't mean at all that you are media literate. Sometimes opposite, people who are educated, they manage somehow to confirm even the craziest, the most crazy conspiracy theories. Thanos Citistas is right, lots of disinfo is disseminated via social media. Shouldn't social media literacy be given priority in elementary schools, even greater priority than a generalized media literacy approach? Katka, do you want to comment here, yeah?
No, our polling confirmed what you just said, that people that had university education were actually much more prone in Slovakia, especially, to believe in conspiracy theories rather than people who had only elementary education. So yeah, being educated doesn't mean that you're not going to be believing or not believing false information.
Michael?
Yeah, I'm happy to add. See, the problem with school teachers is a big one, but the thing is that the only thing we can do is we can train those teachers on the basics of media literacy themselves. And when we do this, we don't say, hey, trust this media outlet, don't trust that media outlet. We just tell them, okay, you see this conspiracy theory, and this is how conspiracy theories work. And this is how they're spread. And this is how you can check this information. And you know what? Quite a few people get really upset at our trainings because they were fooled, and nobody wants to be fooled. I've seen people in eastern parts of Ukraine who are like, oh God, this is stuff that I've believed like the last couple of years. This is not true. And we're like, you know what? We're not telling you what's true or not. We're just telling you how to use Google to check whether it's true or not, or other search engines. So basically, this is quite often an eye-opening experience. And those teachers who go through those trainings, they will be less susceptible to disinformation and conspiracy theories. But there is no perfect solution. Believe me, there will still be teachers who will go through any kinds of trainings and who will still believe that the earth is flat. Just because they cannot see the rest of it, they can see the flat surface of the earth. And, in the United States, there's still 6% of people who believe that, or at least they say that they believe that the earth is flat. And no matter no matter what they've learned in elementary schools themselves, they will still be believing in their conspiracy theories. But what we can do is we can work with teachers. And in most cases, it does help.
Thank you. Caitlin comments here, check your sources, which is which is quite reasonable. My last question, because we have a few minutes left. So our discussion today turned to this media literacy discussion, how we can build partnerships to make our media literacy programs better. But my question now will be about firewalls, how Ina defined it. Firewalls, how far we can go in partnering with influencers, for example, with other NGOs, where is the border, where is this border which defines our independence, what is reputational risk, for doing these partnerships, what is reputational risk as well, in providing, the training where we cheating on people to show that they're not right, for example. What are your take on this? Are these limits, are these borders changed with this digital, in the digital era, or it remains the same all this time? Who wants to take this?
May I say just a few words about USAGM firewall, because it's an issue that often, participants, especially of our training programs for journalists around the world on a number of issues, they bring it up, especially when we start discussing like ethics of journalism. What is the firewall? How do you assure it? And they say, how can we trust USAGM? It's US government agency, right? Well, USAGM programs are not propaganda. And I will tell you why. Because the mission of USAGM and its network is to broadcast accurate, balanced, and comprehensive news and information to an international audience. Our mission is to promote freedom and democracy, and it is achieved through journalistic integrity and through the dissemination of factual news and information to an audience that typically does not have access to a free press. And USAGM broadcasters know that their effectiveness is based on their credibility and that their listeners are not interested in propaganda, okay? And it is assured by the US Information and Educational Exchange Act of 1948. It is known as the Smith-Mundt Act, and it assured that Voice of America at first couldn't even broadcast in the United States. Now the act has changed because it was changed in 2011, because now you can access our programs domestically, internationally, anywhere online, right? So also, I just wanted to show you how our agency is supportive of this, earlier we discussed how supportive of independent journalism. We even created at the USAGM an employee association. It's a voluntary organization. I'm part of it. And it was started by Joan Maurer, director of my office, and our colleagues in Office of Program Research. What we do, we actually support journalists who work in difficult conditions around the world. In crisis situation, we help them and their families in crisis. We contribute our own resources to do that. So that's how we assure that our programs and those who we work with, independent journalists, are totally independent, broadcast, according to the highest principles of journalism. Of course, USAGM mandate comes from, multiple pieces of the US legislature. We are accountable to 6 bipartisan House and Senate committees in the US Congress. And as a federal agency, USAGM budget request is part of the president budget request for the Congress. But again, we do not report, and we are not taking orders from them what to say, how to broadcast. We are totally independent in our editorial decisions. Very often we are even criticized by members of this or that party in the US Congress who don't like that we show all walks of life in the United States, all thoughts, all beliefs, all opinions. But that's how journalistic integrity is achieved. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, perhaps Michael and Katka, do you want to add about reputational risks in building partnership with those who do not belong to your sector?
I'm happy to answer, but Katerina, would you like to go first?
You go first.
Okay, sounds good. So basically, I can only talk on behalf of IREX, and I can say that you're absolutely right, Franek. In this day and age, it's much harder to ensure that there is no that the firewall actually works and there is no censorship or other pressure, especially in countries where we work in the Middle East, in Europe and Eurasia region, in Africa, in Central America, in Latin America. You can just basically point at any direction on the map or the globe, and there will be issues with those firewalls, with quite a few actors in the field of media, government, NGOs. I would just echo what Ina just said. I think media ethics is the key here. One of the things that we can actually teach journalists when we work with journalists, and this should be the most important one, is the concept of media ethics, media integrity of media, and independence of media. And those people, who live here in the United States or in Western Europe, they don't even often realize how bad the situation is in other parts of the world. Journalists do not understand the basics of media ethics. They don't understand the basics of independence. Quite often, journalists do see the government as the organization that, they may not be paying them money, but you have to, say good things about them. We see this all across countries not all across, but in quite a few countries in Africa, in Europe and Eurasia region. And unfortunately, the situation is not getting better these days. We're seeing the pretty bad statistics. So media literacy is important, but for journalists, I would say first and foremost, we need to continue training them on the basics of integrity of media and media independence. Thank you, Katerina.
Let's say this way. I think that we never had a bad experience when we cooperated with journalists that we know to be good investigative journalists. I mean, when you do research, there are always going to be people who are going to question your research. But when you have data, we have Excel sheets where we have links, we do screenshots of everything. That's something that cannot be disputed, so always make sure that our research is strong and nobody can question it. When it comes to cooperation and firewall, I think that our firewall, or going over that firewall, how we manage to do that is eventually by collaborating via different digital influencers. I live in a country, or in this region, it's very predominant to label researchers and independent journalists to be, CIA agents of George Soros, actors of foreign influence. So by working with organization, governments, by working with other digital influencers, we are validifying our research. We're giving it another level of authority. And when it comes to digital influencers who, do not necessarily agree with our opinions, well, that's their opinion. They have the right to have a different opinion. And it happened to us that we wanted to do a campaign. We approached a digital influencer or an artist, and during the conversation, we found out that they themselves believe a lot of disinformation narratives. And, you cannot really build critical thinking with these actors. And we said, well, thank you. We have a different opinion on this particular, argument or fact situation, and we're just going to part our ways because they have the right to disagree with us and believe in whatever they want to believe. So, you need to be cautious. You need to make sure that your research, your data are strong, and taking risk is always part of working with other people. that's just the way it is.
If you allow me just to comment on what it have been said, I think what all our speakers presented, it is very valuable in the following terms. Because journalism, mass media sector is witnessing a lot of changes. So it's more than important to have a training that it will keep them on. Secondly, it is equally important to encourage journalists to go on an independent way. So it is very important what I think Ina highlighted regarding USAGM giving opportunities about journalists going their own way and in order to accredit independent voices. What actually Katarina and Michael have suggested also, I think it's equally important on the following terms, because it seems that we share a common understanding, depending of course on the press and media freedom in every country, but beyond this information, the main challenge it is how to keep up journalists in being continuously trained. For example, recently, MCN announced that it will use more and more bots in order to do part of the journalistic daily routine. So this means that the profession itself changes a lot. So we have to keep up, and I think that what all of you have mentioned provides an excellent opportunity in order to be able to provide journalists with the opportunities that they lack. Because especially media sector nowadays, and especially after the COVID-19, will be challenged. They lack the resources to train their staff and thus to respond to the everyday needs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think we have to wrap up here. We are 20 minutes after. I'd like to thank each of our great speakers today. I think it's just the beginning of the conversation. Yes, as Ina mentioned, this idea emerged a few years ago. We discussed that we have to discuss how to organize partnerships and coalitions. But I think, today we just put the basement, for this conversation. Later we have to go in depth to each aspect of these partnerships, how to motivate, how to create values, how to set up common goals, also considering all the challenges and limitations. So thanks to Katarina Klingova from GLOBSEC, to Michael Mirny from IREX, and of course to Ina Dubinsky from USAGM, to my co-host and our friend and leader of DCNC Hub, Nikos Panagiotou, to all attendees today, both on Facebook, YouTube, and here on Zoom. And I'd like to say that this event was co-organized by DCNC Hub, US Agency for Global Media, World Learning as the part of virtual events launched in the context of the COVID crisis. So it's not about COVID anymore, but perhaps we can think about partnerships during COVID as well. And DCN Southeast Europe Hub is the organization supported by the US Department of State Office of Citizen Exchanges. And we are very thankful to all the partners who help us and work with us. So let's stay in touch. Have a nice day, and let's build partnerships.
Thank you very much to our partners, DCN, you, Franek, and you, Nikos. Thank you. It was a pleasure to meet Katarina, and it's a pleasure to work again with Michael Mirny. And of course, thank you to all participants who contributed their comments. Thank you for your time. And this is, as Franek mentioned, is the basement.